Once again, thanks for having us. We're super excited to be here. To give a brief background to myself, my name is Fabiana. I'm a senior client success analyst at SimilarWeb. Also get into a little bit more about what SimilarWeb does. Essentially, my day-to-day involves helping my clients succeed. So SimilarWeb is a market intelligence platform, and we measure the digital world. We really track how consumers are navigating the web at scale. And so my job is to help customers and brands succeed, really understand how they're performing compared to their industry, to their market competitively, and find opportunities for them to succeed. So that's a little bit about me and my day-to-day, and I'll hand it on over to Sonia to introduce herself.
Yeah, absolutely. But first of all, thank you, Vito, and hey, Fabiana, great to see you again. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and looking forward to our discussion. I am a consumer marketer. My passion really lies at that intersection of consumer and digital. I started my career at Colgate-Palmolive, a fantastic company with great leadership and iconic brands, and that's really where I built my foundation in terms of how to grow brands and businesses. I am a curious person by nature and love the digital and e-commerce space, and that then led me to the Nature's Bounty company, where I was heading up e-commerce for their vitamins and health supplements business. After which I joined Mars, which is where I am now. Mars is a beautiful, purpose-led, values-driven family business. And I have the chance of working in Mars Petcare, which is its biggest business segment. And within Mars Petcare, I work at Banfield Pet Hospital. And Banfield is America's largest provider of general veterinary services. And it's truly a business with a beating heart. I think of it that way. It has over 1,000 hospitals across the country, 20,000 associates, many of who are veterinarians. And if any of our listeners have been in a pet hospital and you've seen what happens there, it's no easy job. And for many in the field and in the hospital, this is really, a calling or a vocation with real purpose. So in my day-to-day, I have the honor of working alongside some very dedicated professionals and really seeing compassion in action every day. So that's a little bit about myself and what I do.
I think we can all attest to those of us that are pet parents that definitely our pets are our lives. So very thankful for all of the professionals out there, helping our pets stay healthy and safe and live thriving lives. Absolutely. I'm lucky to have my 15-year-old dog, Fraser, still alive and kicking, which is really special. And so I definitely have a lot of respect for those in the field as well. Personally, for me, we definitely saw massive growth to the pet care industry in COVID. I think we all kind of have seen, whether it's yourself or friends or family, have new pets join their homes and their lives. We definitely saw that here at SimilarWeb from the digital measurement side. So just tremendous growth across the pet care industry. And now I kind of joke that I feel like I'm a bit of a pet care expert because it brought a lot of it shed a lot of light on what's happening in the industry, SimilarWeb, and some of the connections I was having with our customers and clients. And the concept that we always go back to is being a pet parent. And I love this phrase. I think also pet parents love this phrase, adds that legitimacy there. But Sonia, would love to hear, what happened in COVID from your perspective, what you saw happening in the industry, and what were even some of the things that were super surprising?
Yeah, COVID has changed all of our lives, my goodness. And for so many of us, it's it's brought to light feelings of isolation, the need for companionship, for comfort. So it's really no surprise, just as you said, Fabiana, that so many people became new pet parents during the pandemic. And I was reading this new ASPCA research that was just released, and it said, since the start of the pandemic, 1 in 5 US households have adopted a pet. That's some 23 million households in the United States. The number is staggering. And what you were saying is really about the human-animal bond. It's stronger than ever today. And I was reading this other research, and it was an interview with pandemic pet parents, and it said, over 90% of people wholeheartedly agree that their pets during the pandemic have improved their own wellness, physical, mental, emotional, and that's only positive news. What's really interesting, as we talk about the pandemic, given where we are now, the pandemic, a number of people are, making a transition going back to the office. That is also having a big impact on pet parents and pets. Pet anxiety is the #1 issue that pet parents talk about. Now, as parents who have been working from home for 2 years and making their way back to the office, what does that mean for pets? It has big implications, right? And that's where so much research has been done, and we found workplaces that are inclusive and that are pet friendly see a direct improvement in associate wellness and in positive, joyful work culture. So that's been a really, really interesting insight as well. And if there are any employers listening in or watching in, it's something to really consider, making your workplace pet friendly. But yeah, COVID has had a massive impact on the pet space in terms of pet adoptions, growth in pet care, and now what we're seeing in terms of the impact on how we think about the workplace of the future as well.
Yes, I definitely don't mind having extra furry friends at work. Tomorrow we have yet to officially go back into the office, but I've been by choice going into the office for a year and a half now. So I feel like I was like the weird person that only was out of the office for like 3 months, and I was like, get me back in. But it's definitely been really fun coming back into the office, experiencing a sweet furry friend here and there. But in terms of that anxiety, I definitely am hearing it with even my close friend circles at a dinner party.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because we're seeing it from the perspective of consumer search behavior. So something in SimilarWeb, being able to understand, what are pet parents searching around pet anxiety, and then just seeing the tremendous growth, like the search volume for all these different anxiety-related terms. So very concerned parents, pet parents, wanting to offer the best for their COVID animals that have grown up in a very, very different world than those prior to. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, were there any other insightful like pet discoveries that you found on your end? I mean, like for me, just really interesting to see that not only from like a retailer perspective of the Chewy, Petco, PetSmarts of the world, see massive increases, but then seeing pet adoption sites, massive increases. And then even for more of, the pet food industry has just absolutely blown up, like can't even reach demand to support now this 1 in every 5 households. Anything else that was just kind of shocking, surprising during this time that you've seen?
There are a few things that have all come up, and it all stems to that core insight of, pet parenting is about unconditional love. And like you rightly pointed out, right? Now more than ever, with the growth in number of pet parents, we will do anything we possibly can to give our pets the longest, healthiest life possible. And that is the driver of all of the growth that we're seeing. And there's some big core macro trends. One is really, and this is insightful, is really the humanization of pet care. When you think about, you mentioned pet food, just take that category, for example, right? 5-6 years back, it was really all about the kibble. But now when you look at the food space, it's about fresh food. It's about the farmer's dog. It's about frozen food and refrigerated food. When you look at younger pet parents, the younger millennials, or the Zoomers, Gen Z, there is this growing trend of home cooking for my pet, because it's good for their health and it'll help them live longer. So the humanization of pet care is a massive trend that we're seeing. I think the second thing that is also growing very quickly is this whole idea of holistic health. Beyond just pharmaceuticals, what else can I do for my dog or my cat, my pet, to help them live the best life possible? And the one surprising thing for me coming into animal health was actually seeing how far behind animal health is to human health. In terms of advancement, I would venture to say we're at least 15 years behind, if not more. But now with the growth in the number of people adopting pets, there is a need for more accessible animal health in terms of cost, availability, proximity of care. And it's been really encouraging to see so much work in that area and the advancement in animal health. And I think that's where digital innovation could play a really big role in making pet care and animal health more accessible to pet parents.
Absolutely. I love that point about, digital transformation. I think especially within the more, traditional CPG realm, and those are the customers that I'm interfacing with every day. And I really love what SimilarWeb can do for those in the CPG space. And I'll talk about that momentarily. But in terms of CPG companies, I feel like they feel that they have to make really big strides and really, significant advancements in a short period of time to kind of keep up with, some players that are, let's say, more like digitally native, like you mentioned, a farmer's dog or D2C subscription focused. That's something also we'll be talking about a bit later. So what do you think are some of the biggest areas of opportunity for pet care and digital transformation? Like, what does that intersect look like? Or what are some of the things that you've seen maybe just in the past year or 2 years that are really exciting to you personally, Sonia?
For me, as I think about digital transformation, for me personally, what made this space really exciting is that it is so dynamic. It is always changing. So for those of us who are ongoing learners, from a personal growth standpoint, it's a terrific space to be in. When I think about digital transformation, and you mentioned CPGs, I will say it is a buzzword in our industry. It really is. And when a lot of people talk about digital transformation, they are referring to marketing and sales and the demand generation part of it alone. But to me, that's not only it, that's the level up. For true digital transformation to happen, every single part of the enterprise that impacts the customer experience needs to be digitized and transformed to enable that best customer experience. And I think that's the opportunity really for CPGs to think through it from that lens. If you think about digital transformation, supply chain is really a cornerstone. If supply chain is not built to deliver on that, the front end can only do so much. And as you think about R&D and product innovation, especially for companies that are fundamentally manufacturers, are we thinking about the digital consumer as we think about our recipes, our formulations? Internal IT is obvious. Finance is a really important one because with digital transformation comes the birth of new businesses. Are we looking at financials with a lens that actually allows nascent businesses and gives them the chance to grow and flourish? That takes time to scale, right? HR is incredibly important. A lot of these companies are out there really trying to acquire digital talent, but what about retention? That's where it gets more challenging. Do we have the strategies to keep them there? And I really do think all of these elements need to work together in order for marketing and sales to be successful, to drive that demand with digital. With digital transformation from a leadership standpoint, what I have found is it's really important to be clear on the why of why we're doing it, and then as a leader be able to really work across functional lines to drive that change that is needed. In animal health, I think we have seen so much. It is really exciting. You talked about, digital native and in search and brands. There is massive growth here. And I think what a lot of these companies do really well and brands do really well is that agility of entering markets quickly and understanding what the consumers want and delivering on that. There is tremendous opportunity in pet care with digital transformation. And I think it's not just in terms of the products that we offer, it's also how we offer them, the education that pet parents are seeking, and the services and how the experience is delivered is a huge opportunity as well as we think about digital transformation.
I think that brings up such a great point. In my head, the first thing that popped in, it takes a village, right? It can't just come from one part of the org. You hope that it is coming from leadership, and it's more of, this is what we're embarking on together to kind of motivate that cross-functioning, collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, what's been really interesting is the beauty about SimilarWeb is we can see how consumers are navigating the web at scale. If you think of, imagine having the Google Analytics type data on every website in the world, right? There's so many use cases, there's so many customers we serve. That's what makes my job amazing and super, gives me a lot of gratification. I think what's really interesting is the different, like looking at it from different perspectives and what someone can bring to the table from, let's say, a traditional CPG company. So I think the reason why I love working with CPGs is primarily because I think we have a really strong use case around understanding how you're performing on your partner retailers. So, I think a lot of people on the call could probably agree, if they're in that space, that when you're dealing with your partners, your e-com partners, you have a middleman. And it's kind of like a frenemy situation in a sense. You're really grateful, you have this relationship, but there's a lack of consistency and transparency of performance. Understanding how you're playing against your category or your competitors. So SimilarWeb kind of like lifts up that hood of, I've known how I've been performing on XYZ partners. Now I've got the context of how I'm performing against my competitors. And so that's, the core, which I get a lot of. I have so much fun at work every day, getting to interact with all of these different brands and talking about the problems that they face and the relief that they get when they realize for the first time ever in their careers, oh my gosh, I can actually contextualize this performance for once. And then it's really interesting because very traditional CPG, you have that pushing to the middleman, but you have a brand.com and there's a lot of investment, especially from a digital transformation perspective. Companies want some of that they want more first party data. They want to understand who their consumer is for. How do we, how do we become part of the kind of consideration set, and how does this influence the consumer journey ultimately? So even being able to understand brand.com performance, lacking that conversion element is still super influential. And that's also, an area we can deep dive into. And then lastly, what I'm seeing more recently is the D2C focus. So a lot of CPG companies say, well, we don't need the middleman always. Like, we need those relationships. Those are long lasting. Those are our bread and butter. But let's also try to be digitally native with some of our brands, and compete against, some of these brands that have popped up and have just, captured massive market share. So that's been really interesting for me too, having more of those conversations in the past year or 2 years, definitely more of that head to head competitive ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, just was curious to see, like, where in terms of sorry, I think another point I really wanted to go down is that with digital transformation, everyone needs to kind of be informed all of the time. And I think that's what was something very interesting about COVID that accelerated, SimilarWeb's business, but obviously the business of a lot of other players in the digital space is not relying on traditional market research, or tools that would be a little bit too late to the game before you can really enact on that. So I think that's just one of the many things that have just evolutionized our business in a short period of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you bring up really good points on D2C. And frankly, you talked about the digital insurgent brands that are coming in. The threat is real. The threat really, really is real. And these are brands that, really know how to talk to consumers, because consumers' expectations of that value equation from brands have changed. It's less about mindless consumption. It's about actually knowing where my money is going, investing in brands that are doing more than just making a profit, that are supporting our greater world and sustainability. And D2C, a lot of these insurgent brands do a fantastic job with their storytelling, really connecting with consumers, using that first party data to understand consumers, engage them, and building a relationship based on that, acting with speed and agility to innovate and enter new markets and new categories. And you're right, they're absolutely taking share from a lot of the big players. The scary thing with a lot of the big CPGs and companies is that they may not even be measuring the growth of these little brands. You aren't noticing them until they've actually gone from infants to teenagers, and that's danger right there. So to your point, Fabiana, I think the time is now when we can't keep debating, should we do D2C or not? The question is, how do we do it right? And, having a few themes come up as I think about my experience with D2C. Number one is the importance of a value proposition to the consumer. It's got to be differentiated. It's got to be meaningful. And it's got to give a real clear why buy in terms of changing behavior. Why come to this site and give it traffic and log into something completely new?
Mhm.
The other thing, when I've done D2C and CPGs, I've seen that when it really works, there is very clear alignment up, down, and across the organization on the why. Why are we doing this? Is it just to test and learn? Hopefully it's not. Are we doing it to get data? Because now more than ever, every company needs to be thinking about zero and first party data. Or is this a new incremental revenue stream? And are we going to invest behind it and give it that level of focus? It's when there's that alignment, I have found that D2C tends to be more successful because we're enabling it to be. D2C, I think, is a really important space. And I'm really glad you brought up that question. In the pet care space, we're seeing so many D2C businesses blossom. And it's exciting to see that kind of activity, all in service of what we talked about. It's that pet parent, human animal bond, doing the best we can. People are willing to experiment to give their pets the best products and services possible to give them a long, healthy life.
I could not agree more. What do you find, is just a critical, where should the critical focus be on digital transformation today? Do you think it starts more, I know you have mentioning first party data, does it rely on that CRM? Does it rely on, conducting studies? I'm just curious where you think where the focus should be for some, let's say for some more traditional companies that are trying to accelerate, because you've had quite a career across CPG, yes, but being, a brand innovator yourself and trying to see that change. So curious to what you've seen that's worked really well, for some companies that you've either worked at or for some other players in those space that you've seen.
I sincerely believe that an evergreen focus for every company, whether digital transformation or not, needs to be the consumer. Truly, deeply understanding the consumer, their feelings, their behavior, what's driving that, and how do we as marketers go about being there in all of those moments that matter. I really do believe that needs to be the fundamental focus. And then based on that, we figure out what that digital transformation strategy is and what's the media touch point line, what's the content strategy, so on and so forth. I truly believe that consumer behavior is changing so rapidly these days that we need to be at the pulse of where are they buying? Where are they even deciding to buy? What is the buying process? It's anything but linear. The funnel has been blown up long time back. And based on that, the digital marketing mediums changing so rapidly, the growth of social commerce and live streaming and user-generated content, how do we use that to reach that moment that matters the most? So I think when it comes to focus areas, my advice is focus on the consumer and really understanding them deeply and getting into the pulse of the consumer, because everything else flows from that.
You can never go wrong with a customer-centric approach. Absolutely not. Any other tips too for anyone who might be listening in terms of that D2C element that we mentioned and just seeing a lot of growth there? Any tips, tricks, aside from just connecting with the consumer that you might offer some advice?
I think the beauty of D2C is that is the agility that it offers, right? It's an opportunity to get really close to the consumer, to really test and learn before we scale, and take the opportunity to do that. With a lot of companies that find, we launched D2C, like, oh, it didn't meet expectations, but why? What did we learn? And it's okay to pivot and keep iterating and optimizing to get it to that point where it's actually a minimum viable product, And I think that's my 2 cents, is that when we get an idea and you think it has some legs, keep working on it and optimizing it. Use that data to actually make meaningful business change, to drive that customer engagement and meaningful KPIs. And I think that's really an opportunity with D2C, the ability to continually test, learn, iterate, and optimize.
Wonderful advice. I feel like someone for me coming with a tech background, That's always how, how my brain thinks, in terms of agility. But I think,
Mhm.
like you said, iteration and optimization. I feel like that's how I live my day to day. And it's great to see, companies that have been a little bit more traditional that are pivoting to this space have to think in that mindset. So listen to Sonia, embrace it. Absolutely.
Thank you, Fabiana.
Lovely. So I think for really my closing question is, where do you see pet parents and digital intersect in the future that excites you most?
You know, I think generally speaking, for me, it's this area of social commerce that I think is such an opportunity. And whether it's pet parents or just consumers in general, the whole space of user-generated content, social commerce, live streaming, we started to see more of that with this most recent Prime Day on Amazon. In China, it's a huge growth driver with digital media. And I'm really, really intrigued to see how it comes to life and further grows in the US. As we think about pet parents and pet brands, I in general think that the brands that do a good job at turning consumers into brand advocates are the ones that build most brand love and growth long term. And I think that, with user generated content of social commerce, there is the opportunity to do just that. And it's an area that I'm very interested to see how that grows. But with the other area that really excites me is just the sheer number of different digital mediums and means we have to reach consumers that were absent, frankly, just a few years back. And I think with pet parents, as you think about this whole process of, getting a new puppy or kitten and helping them live the best life for the longest time possible, there's a need for education, information gathering. There are those how-to moments. Those are those help me now moments. There are those moments of deep love. There are those moments of needing real help with healthcare. And I think with digital media across that pendulum, there is such an opportunity to engage, educate, inform, and make animal health just so much more accessible to pet care and pet parents. So there is incredible opportunity, and I'm really optimistic about the future of our industry and how much growth there is and how much we can do to create a better world for pets. I'm super excited about the future, and in animal health, and digital transformation is just going to make it so much more exciting.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. I think something that you said that really resonates too is we're in this age where we buy into brands more so than ever, but we also buy into those storytellers, and then importantly, those that help us in our times of need. And it's really stressful to be a pet parent put in a situation where your pet's health is in question. And those are the people that you never forget, that you really appreciate, and make you feel supported and your pet supported and loved. And having those interactions with a brand can really change the rest of the course of your life and how you interact with that brand. So
Absolutely.
I have my list in my head. I'm sure everyone's going around like nodding in agreement as well. But Sonia, I think you put it incredibly well.